Hello and welcome to Cheshire Audio. Now, this is going to be a continuation of the unboxing video I did. Here we've got an Atoll CD400 CD player. I did an unboxing, went around everything, just vaguely showed a few features. What I want to do today is do the full review of it because they take ages to run in, and what I said in the video was I'll put it on and I'll run it, and when it's sort of stabilised I'll give it a proper listen and then we'll formulate a proper opinion on it. It's taken ages, actually. It was great out of the box. I mean, what I tend to do, if you come in the shop regularly, you'll see this. This has been on downstairs now for 2 or 3 weeks? Something like that, isn't it? I tend to just run things in the shop for background music if I'm running them in, so speakers and amplifiers and CD players. I'll tend to have running. So this has been running in the shop. Straight out of the box, it was really good, to be honest. Straight away I thought this is something special. But it just kept getting better, and it kept sort of stepping forward a little bit, and I kept thinking, has it stabilised yet? Oh, actually no, it's got the sound stage is a bit bigger now. So I've just left it and left it and left it, to the point of Atoll sort of asking for it back, actually. So, yeah. So basically, I need to do the review now. I had a good listen to it a couple of times yesterday. I actually just kept coming up into the top room here to have a proper listen to it. And I'll talk about my findings in a moment. It's interesting, I don't read comments for various reasons, and I've had a few people say that they've read through comments and there's been some quite diverse opinions on the look of it. I actually really like it. I think you always get, to be honest, I think you always get that in comments. There's always the sort of, oh, that's ugly, there's always somebody has to say something that they think's outrageous to just, I don't know, it's just the nature of the internet, really. It is a quirky looking thing, and I can understand why on first impressions you might think it looks a bit odd. I think it does sort of grow on you. At first I wasn't so sure, and I thought, well, okay, if it's really good, you just forgive it the fact that, because it's so good. But actually it's really grown on me now. I actually really like the look of it. I mean, it's intended to sit on top of the IN400 amplifier, which continues the curve. But I think it sits as a standalone really well, particularly if it's on a rack. I think particularly just see that front edge on a rack, it looks really good. So anyway, what I'll do, I've done this before, obviously I did the unboxing, we had a bit of a walk around it, but I'll do that again for people who haven't seen that. And then we'll talk about my findings sound quality wise, which is quite interesting actually. It is quite interesting. So anyway, let's pick up the camera and have a walk around it. Okay, so apologies to all of you who watched the unboxing video, but I'll do a little walk around it again, covering all ground, but just for the people who didn't see. Basically got a bit of an odd shape in some ways. It's sort of quite a bit wider at the back than it is at the front. Like I said, can't need to match in with the amplifier, but it's sort of, I don't know, it's got a sort of stylishness about it, really. I mean, the main thing that probably doesn't come across in the video is the actual build quality is phenomenal. Probably one of the best built CD players I've ever come across, to be honest. Probably bar, probably the Krell from years ago. But even that, to be honest. I mean, internally, this is probably way better anyway. But the casework is just so beautifully done, so solid. Really big, thick aluminium front panel. Everything feels like it's just hewn from solid, really. Front panel, we've got very basic buttons on there, really. There's a big on-off switch at the back, which I'll just try and find. So yeah, it comes on, announces what it is, then goes into standby. Now, standby button brings it on. We've got track select here, and we've got pause, stop, and play. The best feature of this by a mile, and I really like a top-loading player, but there's very few companies have got this right. I think really. It's a really solid sort of shutter type system, and it just feels like this drawer just feels really heavy. You feel like there's a nice amount of resistance as it opens. There's a standard sort of puck like you get with Name Audio and that sort of thing. The magnet on that is ridiculous. I mean, what I would recommend not putting it on top of the player, because basically once it's there, it's not actually that easy to get it off. So you need to get into the habit of just sticking it down by the side, really. But yeah, I mean, that's way better than the name versions. The name ones tend to, sometimes when they get quite tired and start slipping or whatever, I don't think that'll ever get tired, really. And it's got the nice little, if you can see that little Atoll logo on it as well. So everything just feels beautifully engineered, really. It's just, you know, nicely put together. It does feel like you're getting your value out of it. I'm pretty sure the transport on this is based on TIAC, but I should have checked that as usual. I never check my facts. I think it's TIAC based. I know the sort of lesser players are, so I suspect this one will be as well. That's it, really. I mean, what I'll do, I'll just get a CD and we'll put a CD in just to show how everything goes with it. So just when you put your CD in, basically just put it on top of the little platter there. Put your puck on. Close the drawer. Then tries to read the CD. There you go. Play. So there you go. Just off we go and play. And we've got track select. Yeah, it's just lovely to use, really. Pause function. I'll go and get the remote. I know I never do this, but I'm sure people want to see the remote as well. I'll just go and grab the remote and then we'll have a quick look at that, and then I'll show you the back panel. So the remote it comes with is a full system remote, so you can, if you've got an Atoll setup, you can basically run the amplifier, run the CD player, whatever. So it's quite a nice feel to the remote. I mean, it's probably not the most expensive sort of feeling remotes, but it's okay actually. Nice in the hand and everything. So you've got a few extra CD features on that. It repeats, whatever, programming, shuffle, that sort of thing. Yeah, like I say, I never particularly use remotes. Don't know where mine is for my CD player. But yeah, let's have a look at the back panel anyway. Let's not get into the reasons for not using remotes. Back panel wise, we've got quite a lot going on actually on this. It's your main line out, and we've got XLRs as well, so we've got balanced output. There's also optical and coax there too, so if you wanted to run it to a different DAC, but why you would want to, I don't know. And there's inputs as well, which is interesting. So I'm assuming that means you can feed other equipment via the internal DAC, I'm assuming. Again, could be wrong because I'm not a digital person, but that seems to be what's going on there. But yeah, it's just really nicely made, really nicely spec'd. It's for fairly heavy player actually. You can tell the casework is pretty substantial. There must be fairly decent transformers in there and everything. So yeah, that's the walk round. Yeah, what did I think? Let's move the camera. So how did it sound? Let's do a quick tangent off in a different direction first. CD's had a bit of a sort of rough ride generally. It's quite an interesting journey it's taken, I think. If you go back to when it came out at first, it was dreadful. It really was dreadful. And here's me sort of working in the audio industry, trying to get the best sounds for people, and trying to sort of encourage people to kind of listen to things properly and not just follow the mainstream. And it was difficult because people were told that it was perfect sound. It was going to, throw your records away because CD's here and it's perfect sound, and there's not all that mechanical rubbish on record players. How could that possibly work? And they were awful. I mean, really, there was some really nasty stuff out there, really early days. And bit by bit, it got better, to be fair. But an awful lot of people lost interest in hi-fi because they bought CD players and just thought they were losing interest in it. Really, spent money on all the bits to try and fix what they didn't think was there, but they would never blame the CD player. It was a really odd time, really. I think I've said this before on here. The second wave after people buying into CD was buying bigger speakers because they thought the CD player was too good for the system and they needed a bigger speaker, because the knee-jerk reaction to not enjoying your system is to think you need more bass, so bigger speakers. So that kicked off the floor standing speaker phase. Actually, it had profound effects on the audio industry. But bit by bit, they did get better. I mean, I sort of think probably around the time that Meridian were doing things like the 206 Delta Sigma CD player, which I still own. I've still got one of those. They were starting to sound very acceptable, sort of equivalent to a sort of budgetish record player. probably. And bit by bit, there's been other high-end players. We've had some really good stuff at the high end from, well, mid-high end from Riga. Name of some amazing players. There's Akiphase. Who else was there? DCS, done some good stuff. I briefly owned an Audio Researcher that I thought was quite nice as well. That was quite a nice CD player. So it's kind of come of age, but then it's sort of, a lot of the mainstream companies are losing interest in it now. So there's not that many players. There's not many companies who are taking this thing seriously anymore. I mean, even your big companies like Marantz and whatever, they're still producing players, but not as many as they used to, and they're loading features on there, and you kind of wonder what's going on inside, whether they've, it's just not really being taken seriously anymore, because, well, it's on its way out. We'll just produce a few players for the people who insist on still buying it, because obviously streaming is better. We've heard this before, obviously. New technology has got to be better than the old technology. If only people would just stop and listen to it and decide themselves rather than being told by the masses, it would be so much easier for people like me who work in hi-fi shops. But no, unless you stand your ground on it, which I do nowadays. I'm too old to not to I'm getting too old. Anyway, we're not going to that. Yeah, the 400. Because, like I say, I think there's very few people making the decent players now. I can only really think of Akiphase, Atoll, DCS are still doing stuff, aren't they? I think. Name of sort of basically only doing one budgety player now. They're not really. They think streaming is the way. Bless them. Lin have completely gone out of it. So there's very few sort of manufacturers out there that have really got anything worthwhile at all. Oh, the Roxanne Black, that's a good player actually. That is a good player. So there's very few out there really. Some have got sort of leftovers from years ago that they're still producing. But when you actually look at people who are still producing new players and spending the time and the effort to make it right, I actually thinking about it, there's probably only Atoll who are really concentrating on this format. Obviously, in comments there'll be lots of others that people will talk about that I've forgotten about, but generally, from my point of view, I can't think of anybody other than Atoll who are so serious about it, because they've got a big range of players. Every player in the range is superb for the money. That little MD100 took me totally by surprise, because I bought it in because it was a front loader and a smaller player, and perhaps it would alleviate this issue that people had with the Riga Apollo being a top loader. Then turned out to be a better sounding player anyway. Not everybody thinks so. Some people like the sort of warmth of the Apollo, but generally musically and everything else, the Atoll was the measure of it really. I've done loads of the MD100. It's such a good player for the money. £650. There's no competition for it really. And as you go up, the CD100 is a much bigger sounding version. The MD100 much more authoritative sound. The 200 bigger scale again and everything. So I did have a sort of feeling that surely they can't keep being this good. The 400 has got to be all looks and no go perhaps. Perhaps it just sounds like a 200 but with a fancy case on it. Far from that really. If anything, it's probably a bigger jump from the 200 to this. It's what I found was, because I think I've mentioned already, there's a big running in period with this, and Atoll generally do seem to need a lot of running. Why that is, I don't know. I've been asked this question. I don't know why CD players need running in really. I don't know what's going on, whether it's just in the audio board or what it is that's going on, but they seem to settle down after 2 or 3 weeks generally. This straight out of the box was good, and if you come in the shop regularly, you'll notice I do run an awful lot of things down on the shop system. I'll have just things playing over and over and over again. Same CD in there, just repeat. And then when I want to actually properly listen to it, to bring it into the top room, straight out of the box downstairs, I could tell that this was something special. It's one of the very few CD players, possibly might be the only CD player that I've found. If I walk into the shop, I get distracted by it and stop and listen. Because most CD players I find I can just carry on and do work or whatever and get on with the daily chores. And there's music playing, and that's very nice, but I don't tend to focus on it. The 400 was different. It drew me in a little bit, and I'd find myself stopping and then going to I wonder what such a thing sounds like on it, and getting involved with it, which generally only happens if I'm playing a record down there. If I've got a record player on, I tend to have the Nottingham in Space Junior playing downstairs occasionally, and I don't get any work done when that's on. And this was approaching that. It did have that same feel of the music was calling to me all the time, and I had to go and listen to it. What it seems to do, which is quite rare for a CD player, and I've only ever come across this with the Top Riga and the big name, and Accuphase probably, to a greater or lesser extent, I suppose, is very, very three-dimensional, very front to back with the imagery. Most CD players I find are very 2D. You get a little bit of projection of the vocals and things like that, but as far as the whole, sound stage of the band and everything, they do tend to be very, very sort of flat, really. CD-wise, I did this before, and it does seem to work quite well. This, I listened to. Funny, it's quite interesting the CDs I've picked up, because the first CD, once it was up here, was a sort of old favourite for hi-fi type listening, which was Eric Clapton Unplugged, which, if you've never heard this, live recording, very simple, a couple of mics, then with it's just a simple versions of songs, so just him on guitar generally. There's a bit of the band as well, but generally it's just him and guitar. And the acoustic on that was phenomenal, really, really big acoustic. What took me by surprise when literally the first few seconds of this being on, because it's live, there's all the audience, and the sort of roar of the crowd as he came on was so realistic. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard the CD version of this sound like that ever. The vinyl version does, but the CD version has never been like that to me. But with the Atoll, it really did have a proper sort of room acoustic to it of the audience and band in front and all that sort of thing. So that was really impressive, actually. That. After that, I sort of, rather than following on the usual CD sort of favourite recordings for hi-fi, I kind of went off-piste a little bit, because it was sort of, you could tell that this thing will just play anything. What do I fancy listening to? And I didn't really think about recording quality. So I went straight in with, and this is a weird album, this is. Jim White, What Wrong-Eyed Jesus. I think I've talked about this one in here before, actually. There's a track on this, and this is slightly for hi-fi reasons I put this on, I suppose. Partly because I didn't listen to it for a while, but partly there's a track called Word Mule, which is almost like a battle between the vocal, a double bass and a guitar. And in most setups, it's a racket. But it's one of those tracks, you put it on, it's got this thunderous sort of bass going on with this double bass that somebody's sort of banging away on. And you think, this should be a great demonstration track, if only it wasn't so raucous and confused and difficult to listen to. And so I always play it and just think, I wonder if this one will make more of it. I wonder if this... And the 400 completely separated everything out, everything was clean, whatever, and it was great, actually. It's the first time I listened to that track ever on anything and thought, yeah, that's a great dem track. And actually, for that reason, it's a great dem track, because it can sound dreadful. Also played, favourite track on this is The Road That Leads to Nowhere, which is just a beautiful track. The Worm Mule track, his voice is really odd on it, really odd. Takes a bit of getting used to. But The Road That Leads to Nowhere is beautiful. It's really nicely done. It sort of builds, and it's got all this sort of orchestration going on, and it's getting exciting. Here, spill me tea then. But yeah, no, that really, really nice. I really enjoyed that one. Time was pressing, so I didn't listen to any more of that, but I was kind of tempted to. I actually went with a bit more mundane, actually, but I love Kate Rusby. I've seen her loads of times, got more of her albums than I'd admit to. Very middle of the road, some people might say bland, but I love it. I just think there's a lot of character in the recordings of these. There's a lot of use of brass band, a lot of interesting stuff going on the albums. And they're just nice. I think people don't like the word nice, but they're nice albums, and it was just, I listened to the entire album of that. The intention was to listen to the first couple of tracks. No, actually, I put the first two tracks on thinking because I wanted to listen to Hunter's Moon, and ended up listening to the whole thing. So that kind of says something, really, because generally with CD I get bored with it, and I'll just listen to a couple of tracks and think, yeah, okay, I've heard that now, and take it off. But no, that ended up right to the end of the album. And then I went to Deja Vu, which is probably one of my favourite albums. Sorry, there was a noise in the background then, I was just listening. the Deja Vu. And Deja Vu is actually quite a difficult album to reproduce, I think. It's really well, there's an awful lot of interesting production going on. Okay, it's an older album, it's 1970, you're going to say 71, isn't it? It's 1970, which is kind of my favourite period, actually. 69 to 71, most of my favourite albums are from, really. Okay, the recording quality of this isn't amazing, but the production quality is very good. There's an awful lot of stuff going on, a lot of phasing and going on, and things moving around and things off in the distance. And it portrayed it really well, and generally CD doesn't. The vinyl version of that is amazing, with a decent record player. You hear things on it you've never heard before. And I wouldn't say the 400 quite went to that degree, but it did the acoustic and it did this sort of interesting placement of stuff shooting around a bit. So yeah, that was good. If I'd got a CD version of the David Crosby album I've talked about on here again, if only I could remember my name, that album, that would be quite interesting on CD with that, I think, really, because that's similar production, similar sort of stuff going on that you start to, as you get into better systems, you start to hear stuff that you've never heard before. So that was good. I also sort of went a little bit. Saying I was in sort of around and about 1970. This is a bit earlier, isn't it? Surrealistic Pillow by Jefferson Airplane, which is, I was going to say, I don't think it actually says what year it is. I think that's 69, 70, isn't it? Around the time the Beatles were kind of coming to their end, and there was all these amazing bands coming along. And I think the Beatles kind of must have realised that the days are numbered a little bit, really, because people like Jefferson Airplane and Crosby, Stills and Nash were taking it to another level, really. And I love the Beatles. I'm absolutely besotted with the Beatles. But I think by 69, 70, things were changing, and I don't think they were the right sort of band to try and keep pace with that somehow, really. They could have done separately, but somehow it didn't quite gel. But anyway, back to what am I talking about? Music. So yeah, but I put on White Rabbit because White Rabbit is a horrible clangy track usually. It was a horrible clangy track. It didn't quite come across as well as I hoped it would, but it was way better than I've heard it on CD. My vinyl version, I've got two vinyl versions of this actually, is a lot better. I think it's a lot to do with the actual recording of this, but it was listenable, and quite often I put this on with players and had to take it off because it was starting to get on my nerves. It was much more listenable. Still a bit clangy, but listenable. So it's not completely a wonder machine, but it is. Most of the things I put onto it were really good. Just I think it's down to the CD, I think, really. But yeah, great album, actually. That great album, very weird in places. There's some, very inventive stuff, but trying to think what. Yeah, White Rabbit. So yeah, so that's the CD400. It's generally, I think it's amazing, and it's a sort of player I could take home and listen to and enjoy, and that is saying something, because really I'm not a digital person, as you know, but that really works quite nicely, and it just pulls you into the music. It's lovely to use. The engineering of it is wonderful. So yeah, full marks I would say for that, really. I don't know, it's probably one of the better CD players I've heard. It's certainly in my top 3 or 4 players, I think, overall that I've ever heard, and it's not, in the scheme of things, when you compare it to like a Name 555 with a couple of power supplies, which I think the last price of that was sort of in the mid 20,000s, on that basis it seems like a complete bargain, really, because it's got that big, spacious, realistic sort of feel to it that the big 222 had. So yeah, it's quite something. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks. I'll probably do another video before I go. But basically the shop's closed for a couple of weeks. So if you need to contact me, if you want to email, you can leave a message on the answering machine, to be honest, and I'll try and pick that up when I get back. Yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give a subscribe and a like, and I will see you in a future video. It just might be a bit of a break before I do. Like I said, I'll perhaps try and do a quick video before I go, but we'll see how the timing goes. Thanks for watching. See you soon.